Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, and I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hey guys, how's it
Hello,
going?
hello.
How are
Good,
things?
good, man. Happy Sunday to all y'all.
Happy Sunday. It's the first, I think this might be the first time we've ever recorded back-to-back weeks. Because when we first started, we were doing like one episode a month,
Right.
and then it was like two a month, and now it's like we have an episode every week, but we have interviews in between them all. So this might be the first time we've ever recorded back-to-back weeks.
Well,
This might,
and spoiler alert, but aren't we going back to back to back?
maybe, I don't know. All I know is I'm not here next Friday, so maybe not
Uh, oh, we do have a gap. Okay, fine. So we're doing back to back. Yeah, yeah.
back to back, back to back. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I'm away at a wedding next week, so I had to do some prep for that yesterday. I had to go buy a new tie and go get my suit dry cleaned and all that boring stuff.
Did
Couldn't
they
just, I was
hear?
about to say, couldn't you just wear the one you wore at your own wedding? Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Because I'm already wearing the same suit that I wore to my wedding because I bought my wedding suit rather than renting it.
Mhm.
So I'm already wearing the same suit. I think wearing the same tie would be a little bit cheap.
Do y'all have y'all ever officiated a wedding before?
No.
I am going to be doing that in October.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool.
So
Thank
are
God
you
for being a dudist priest.
oh,
Dude,
so that's the one that you chose?
Yeah, because it's like super easy to get like ordained with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I forget the one that I was just trying to find it really fast. Universal Life, maybe? I can't remember. But I'm officially a pastor at one of these churches that their whole purpose is to set up online and let people become officiants.
I mean, it's not like you should need to like too much for it. It's a pretty like straightforward process. You say a couple things, you let the people speak, you say, "All right, we're done, and get out of here."
No, it's a total administrative thing as far as I don't know how it is in Virginia, but in Texas you have to be an like a official pastor or priest to do it for it to be recognized. So they yeah, so I had to go online and pay $40 to become a priest or a minister in this case. But anyways, dude, you're a dudist priest. I wish I had gone that route.
Yeah, just because like the only reason I got it years ago, and it was just because I told somebody that I could become like an ordained minister in like 30 seconds, and they said no, you can't. I was like, watch, and I did it. All you had to do is like sign a little bit of paperwork and say you
Yeah,
agree, and you're like, yep, I agree, and you're like, congratulations.
the dude abides.
Yeah, I have the email certificate somewhere on my emails.
Right, so before we get into today's topic, do anyone want to sort of give a shout out to stuff they've watched in the last week since we spoke? Maybe you haven't had a chance to watch a ton since it's only been a week, but if there's anything you want to give a shout out to, feel free to do so.
I guess I can go real quick. So I haven't been watching it much variety. I have been watching the Saw films since the new trailer came out for Saw 10. We've made it to 10 of these now. So I've rewatched let's see, since the 8th, I rewatched all the sequels because I saw the first one sometime last month. So yeah, I've been going through those, and that's actually been kind of a very fun watch. Like Saw has a lot of problems, but honestly, it's a good time. It's a good little torture porn soap opera.
Just out of curiosity, because I am not versed in Saw lore. I've never seen a single Saw movie the whole way through. Um, the nine that have been released, does that include that weird little side movie where they try to like make spin-offs?
Spiral, yes, the
Yeah.
Spiral is 9. It's yeah, because
Okay.
I mean, it's still within continuity, but it's not taking place at the same place, sort of thing.
Okay.
Like it doesn't
It-
retcon
It's
anything.
just like somebody was like, "Hey, this movie's kind of like Saw." We're like, "Oh shit! Oh wait, we own the rights to Saw. Let's just put the Book of Saw at the end, and it's okay."
Ironically, the first sequel to Saw 2, that's pretty much what it was. It was
Oh,
Daryl and Bousman had wrote a script, and I can't remember what the name of it was, but the studio was like, "We like this, but we think you could make it into a Saw movie," and so they got Lee Winnell to come in and help him rewrite it, and it became Saw 2. So it's not quite as bad as Hellraiser got, but that was kind of its roots.
Well, that's basically what the Cloverfield franchise did. So, like, they just made some movies and just tagged Cloverfield onto it, and it's like, oh, hey, like, 10th or whatever Cloverfield Lane, whatever that one with John Goodman is, that's
The
actually
best
good.
one.
Yeah. And then there was that one that came out after it dropped like after the Super Bowl about 5 years ago.
Paradox.
That was it, yeah. And that's like literally it's like not a Cloverfield movie, and then they're like just tacked on a Cloverfield thing in the last
At the
minute
very,
of the
very
movie.
end. At the very,
Yeah,
very end.
exactly. It's ridiculous. But the marketing worked because I stayed up after the Super Bowl to watch that because I'm a huge fan of the original Cloverfield movie. So I actually stayed up after the Super Bowl, which is not doesn't sound all that impressive for you Americans, but for me, when the Super Bowl ends at 4 a.m. and I stayed up to watch a fucking Cloverfield movie straight afterwards, it's a bit more impressive.
Godfrey Ho has entered the chat here in this discussion about doing as much with one simple IP as possible. But Adam, what is it about the Saw franchise that you don't think you'd like? I'm just curious.
I will let you guess.
It's the only reason I'm wondering if it has anything to do with like just straight essay stuff. There's not a ton.
No,
That's
no, it's
not
not
real.
that. It's
Actually,
just
there's none.
I just have no interest in watching. Like, I'm not really a big gore person.
I would say
What
watch the first one. It's not gory.
I've heard the
Yeah.
first one is really good, and I've seen bits and pieces of it. So I have heard really good things about the first one. It's one of those films I've always kind of meant to watch. But like I've seen bits and pieces, like I've seen scenes from the later ones, and I just have no interest in watching people be tortured or, no matter how crazy the traps are and stuff. I just like it just does not interest me at all. I just don't find it entertaining,
The,
so yeah,
the one thing I
no
will give
interest.
credit, just and I think it's the reason like a lot of people, because I think a lot of people assume like, oh, it's a big gorehound movie, and it is. It's like as a teenager, it's what got me into like gory movies. But I think a lot of reason people like it is because of the convoluted story. Like they put a lot of work into the story of this franchise that you're like, they really don't have to do this with how many people would watch it just for the traps. It's actually impressive. They sit there and make this convoluted timeline of a mess and put a lot of effort into it. And it's like, okay, cool.
Well,
Because it's not
that's exactly the thing, right? It's not like uh, the third human centipede or something.
no, it's
Like,
not. They actually don't seem to like care about the shock value as much, and they don't hold on to like the gore. That's what I was talking about with somebody recently. It's
yeah.
like they'll show the gore, but they're not there to gross you out. It's like to like make you cringe a little bit, and the editing is so frantic you're not going to see as much. And I mean, a lot of that's probably when James Wan did it originally, it was still like hot effects, but it became kind of a staple of the franchise. That very frantic editing. It's very 2000s, but it stuck around, and it seems like the new one's going a lot back to that as well.
Yeah, like I would never want to see Gaspar Noé's Saw.
No, no, he would definitely linger on everything.
Yeah, but that's the point. That I think that's the perfect word. There's no lingering on the just straight torture stuff. Like most of them are just detective stories, if I remember right.
Yeah, they switch back and forth between being a police procedural and being a medical procedural. Just depends on which movie it is.
Yeah. Anyways, not trying to sway you. I mean, if you don't want to watch it, that's fine. But I just remember being surprised at how normal they were. Like it's almost like some of them are borderline, like it could be a CSI episode or something. With just like slightly uptick on the blood.
Yeah, the thing that I'm not going to do any spoilers, but there is a in the fourth one there is an autopsy, and it is probably the most time they linger on anything is like medical stuff. Like they will show because the MPA will let them get away with anything medical, so they will sit there and they will show complete autopsies and stuff like that, and you're like, oof. And then you'll hear them talk about it. And they said, yeah, we didn't want people to just look at this as like it was a NCIS thing, so we just went all out.
Wait, okay, Adam, please don't. I know you're probably getting antsy. We gotta get the episode going, but that reminds me, if y'all look, this is more for you, Zach. Have you ever watched the short film that Clive Barker made directly before the first Hellraiser?
No, what is it called?
Oh, I don't remember the name, but he like uses some kind of effects with the camera, so it's not exactly skin, but he basically just shows someone being flayed. and like he does it all in this whole like, his whole thing with like pain and pleasure, right?
Right.
And so he tries to make it like some kind of pain and pleasure thing. But I was like, damn, I can't believe more people don't talk about this. I think it's because more people like haven't seen it just because it's like an obscure short. But it's
The
on the
Forbidden, is it
Hellraiser.
called The Forbidden from 1978?
Probably, yeah.
You reviewed it on Letterboxd. That's why I
That's
asked.
yeah, that's the one then, yeah. Um,
Okay.
it's on the Hellraiser disc. That's how I saw it. I didn't like seek it out. I was like, oh, what was his first short? Oh my God.
Oh no, his first one was actually before that called Salome. It's like 18 minutes. Salome, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to find the name, but anyways, it's one of those two. Yeah, but I was like, damn, he didn't hold back. So what else have
So,
you
what
been
about either
watching?
from either one of y'all? What have y'all been watching? So I don't make it a Saw podcast.
Sawcast. What's the thing coming out? Oh, Saw Patrol.
Saw Patrol. Yeah.
Uh, okay, so I'll just do this very fast. So In the Line of Duty 4 is one of the rare times where I think the fourth movie in the franchise is the best.
Well, the
Um,
Phantom Menace exists, so there you go.
I don't even quite know how to respond to that. Um, I- the statement was the Phantom Menace is the best Star Wars movie.
Yeah, is that a controversial statement or something?
The,
Doesn't everybody feel this way?
you're trolling.
How many lies have I been living? No, I am trolling, but I do like the Phantom Menace. I think that movie gets shit on way harder than it should. But anyway,
You
that's
have
a story for another podcast.
you have a Jar Jar tattoo. Um, do y'all both seen Kill Bill, right? So you know how they talk
Yeah.
Yeah.
about Wu Ping. He's
Mm.
a choreographer and he's kind of there when they get into um some of the like a mentor like he's like a older like mentor type. So he is a famous director and did The Drunken Master, The Magnificent Butcher, all the Tiger Cage movies, Iron Monkey, Tai Chi Master, but worked a lot with like the best in his choreography record is you just keep scrolling on IMDb if you look at his choreography stuff. Um, but he directed this movie and it's awesome. Like honestly like it doesn't have Michelle Yeoh, doesn't have Cynthia Rothrock. It has Donnie Yen before he did all the Ip Man movies. And he's just a physical force. Like that dude is an amazing martial artist. The way that he moves his body, like it's almost like his legs are separated from the top half of his body. He just like when he does a roundhouse kick, it's almost like his top half is just staying still. His legs are flying around. It's that dude is insane. Anyways, yeah, In the Line of Duty 4. I mean, I love the whole series to be honest, but that one was very, very good. Um, have y'all ever seen or do you know the name Martin Beck as far as sort of gritty Swedish detective stories?
No.
No.
Okay. Anyways, the one of the Radiance Spine 9, they started calling this guy Beck halfway through, and or I mean, in the beginning of the movie, I was like, wait a second, what? Because it's a Swedish movie, and so I looked it up, and I was like, oh no, shit, this is a Martin Beck story. I like his I like it's a character. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's I think it's a pair. Actually, no, I think it's a pair of people called Shoval and Walu. So apologies to the Swedish folks out there. Sure, that's not how you
Kind of
say it.
like one of these like Mike Hammer style characters that kind of shows up in different things.
Actually, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's just a series of detective stories, right? But
Yeah.
instead of like Agatha Christie novels or something where there's some whimsy there, it's mostly pretty dark and gritty stuff. But Man on the Roof is a Swedish movie that it just feels plucked right out of New Hollywood. It's awesome, like very, very, very much like The Conversation or French Connection, like these type. Um, Really, really good.
The
Uh,
director has some films coming out from Criterion soon, right? Is there like a
Videberg, Bo Videberg.
Yeah, yeah. Did I see
That
something on
doesn't.
Criterion are releasing a couple of his movies?
Let me see. Criterion.
Or
That
maybe
that
they come
wouldn't.
onto the channel or something. I saw
Let's
some. I
see.
thought I saw that recently.
No, let's see. So Spine 1189 coming out. Oh, coming out in a week. Actually, there you go.
Oh,
So
cool.
by the time this episode airs, this will be out. Um, it's called New Swedish Cinema. Bo Videberg's New Swedish Cinema. Looks like there's 4 movie box set coming out.
Cool.
I'll definitely check that out based off of that. And then the only thing I'll just say quickly is I'd never seen The Killing before, and I would encourage anybody who's listening to go to Reddit to the Criterion r/Criterion conversation and read everybody's thoughts on it. Just what a fantastic movie. I don't know what I don't want to say I was hesitant to see it. I was just sort of neutral on it. It was like an earlier film from Kubrick. I'd heard that some of his earlier films are a little like not quite as good, but man, this one is amazing.
His first 2 movies do suck. They're pretty
Okay.
bad.
Okay, yeah.
I still haven't seen his first 2. I'm not complete on Kubrick anyway because there's a few in the middle that I haven't seen either. I haven't seen Spartacus or Lolita, but I also haven't seen his first 2, and it's just kind of like working up the effort to watch them, knowing that they're going to be bad.
Lolita, I can't imagine that's something that you'd be drawn to, just knowing what you watch typically. But
Well, I've read the book, so the book is actually pretty good. So
yeah, exactly. He handles it well. One thing I'm curious, and Zach, if you wrote this already, I'm sorry for not catching it, but something dawned on me when I was watching The Killing. I think Kubrick is like at the end of the day, he's just a genre director.
I think, I think he seemed to just like to read, like what he liked to read is what he liked to make. Because I mean, people talk about how bad the first 2 are, and they're probably the only 2 films he made that aren't based on a novel.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I think everything else is based on a novel, which I mean, he changes the novel 100% completely every time he made one. But
I think
it seemed like,
2001 technically isn't based on a novel because it was written that the book was being developed at the same time as the movie.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. But
Which one is that?
2001: A Space Odyssey. Arthur C. Clarke
2001.
was writing the
Okay.
book at the same time the movie was being written, so
Oh, cool.
it's basically the same story, just kind of interpreted in 2 different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think I'm pretty sure The Killing is like my mind is telling me The Killing was also a book, and I just can't remember what it is now.
Yeah, it was. It was adapted from a book. Yeah, like I think I don't know, maybe to call Kubrick a genre director maybe a stretch, but like when it comes to, well, actually maybe it's not a stretch. But like the one thing that always impressed me with Kubrick, especially with sort of when you put him up against like the pantheon of like great directors, a lot of the great directors they have their area that they're really good in. Like Hitchcock, he's great at creating crime dramas. Scorsese's great at creating, again, crime dramas, but more centered around gangsters. They all kind of have their niche. But Kubrick doesn't really have a niche. He never really made the same movie twice. And every time he did touch on a genre, he went and like made like one of the best of that genre. So like, science fiction, 2001 is probably the best science fiction movie ever made. Horror, you have The Shining, which is one of the best horror films ever made. Comedy, you have Doctor Strangelove, which is one of the best comedy movies ever made. Everything he seemed to touch like turned to gold. When it came to once he wanted to make a film in a particular genre, he always kind of elevated it.
That's why he shouldn't have made a second war film. He did great with his first one and shouldn't have made a second one.
Exactly. Paths of Glory is an absolute masterpiece, and then Full Metal Jacket is just a bit of a mess. So,
man, that's one I need to see. Then I guess that's one of the few that I haven't seen from him.
Paths of Glory.
Paths of Glory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good, dude. It's really good.
Wow.
Really, really, really great film. Sorry, I'll poke through unless you have something else to talk about, Chris. I'll poke through mine.
No,
and
go
then
ahead,
we
go
can
for it.
Get cracking. When we recorded last, I told Zach that the next movie I was going to watch was going to be The Guest, and I didn't lie. I watched The Guest during the week. So good.
Thank you. I was like a little anxious. I was like, oh no.
So good. Chris, you'll really like The Guest. If you liked Your Next, you'll like The Guest. It's a really, really good film. I thought I knew the twist going in, and like it still managed to surprise me.
Okay.
So that was really, really enjoyable watch.
Did
Just a
you
lot of
catch
fun.
the Halloween 3 mask?
Yes, yes, I did indeed.
So good.
Silver Shamrock. Yeah. I totally get why you were saying if Halloween continued to develop to be like an anthology, why this would kind of fit. Totally get that. It's a really, 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 really fun film. Dan Stevens absolutely kills it. Great film. What else did I watch? I finally got around to seeing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It came out on digital this week, so I finally got to see because I didn't get to catch it in the cinemas. Really good. Like these are like both of these Spider-Man animated movies are probably like the best animation I've ever seen in a movie. It's just incredible. It's not a genre or like, well, I suppose genre is the wrong word. It's not a sort of what's the word I'm trying to think of? A medium. It's not a medium. I'm like the biggest guy. The three of us know someone in our Discord who's like is like an animation film nerd, and I'm definitely like the kind of opposite of that. But like I don't have anything against animation, but geez, like the animation in these films are incredible. So much unique style is put into them. So Cross Spider-Verse is really, really good. I'm looking forward to the third one, which I don't think is coming out till next year or the year after, to kind of wrap up the story. So I'll be looking forward to that. I watched a movie on the Criterion Channel. It's part of a collection that got added. I can't remember the name of the director off the top of my head, but it's like 1930s Underworld is like the name of the collection. And there's a film in there that's just over an hour long called Hell's Highway, which is a really cool prison camp movie. It's basically about these guys who are just on a chain gang building a highway. It sort of follows this one guy who's basically trying to plan an escape, but then just as he's about to pull it off, his little brother gets brought into the chain gang as well. Because the little brother, just basic premise is that he went after the guy who got the big brother thrown in jail. So he got thrown in jail along with him, and now he's trying to look out for his little brother while also trying to plan an escape. And it came out in 1932, but it's super stylish, really well made film. Like I said, it's only an hour long, so if you're looking for just some like a quick, easy watch, it's also like good. I recommend Hell's Highway. It does unfortunately have a tacked on smaltzy ending that the studio made them do, so the ending is kind of eye rolly, but the rest of the film is really good. I watched another film a couple of days ago called Experiment in Terror. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's sort of like a neo-noir the Indicator put out a few years ago. It's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years. I never got around to watching it. Then I read an article from Collider earlier in the week about the title of the article was the little scene film that influenced David Lynch. And I was like, oh, well, let me see what this is. And it said Experiment in Terror. I was like, oh, okay, I have this. Why haven't I not watched this yet? And I can certainly see some of the influence. Like literally the start of the film, a person drives past a sign that says Twin Peaks on it. So the influence is pretty obvious in some parts. Unfortunately, the film is it's over long. Where should have been a nice sort of tight 90 film noir, but it drags out to over 2 hours, and yeah, it's unfortunately just becomes very drawn out unnecessarily in a lot of areas. Still an interesting film, but yeah, one film that kind of wastes a lot of its premise and tension by sort of dragging it out unnecessarily. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is I convinced Neve to watch Night of the Hunter just so I have an excuse to watch Night of the Hunter again, so I can once again say that Night of the Hunter is one of the best films ever made. Masterpiece, 10 out of 10. Amazing film.
So what did she think is the real question?
Of Night of the Hunter? She thought it was pretty good. She was kind of getting a bit tired of it at the end. Which I can kind of get to some people because it does have a bit of a weird structure. So she was like, "Is there much long of this?" And I was like, "No, there's like 5 minutes left." This is when Robert Mitchum just shows up at Miss Cooper's once he kind of tracks them. So this is at that part where he's just kind of showing up and like, "Nah, there's like 5 or 10 minutes left. We're pretty much at the end now." She's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, it was pretty good then." Because she had watched Experiment in Terror with me as well, and to say she was dreadfully bored is an understatement. So Night of the Hunter was a bit snappier in comparison.
And you
I
didn't like
can't.
encourage her by having like divorce papers like to the side, just like in case she's like, be careful what you say.
Well, she had already known going in because basically what I did was, and how I sort of do this sometimes with Neve, I'll just go and pick some movies off my shelf and hand them to her so she can read the blurb, and I'll be like, you choose the movie, and if you want to ask any questions or you want any comment from me, if you need to help narrow it down, then I'll do that. So I handed her like five movies. She narrowed it down to three, and she was like, just give me like your thoughts quickly on these three movies. And we got to Night of the Hunter, and I was like, this is my second favorite movie of all time. And she was like, okay, yeah, we'll watch this one then. So I think that's all she needed.
Yeah, I can tell y'all are in the honeymoon phase of marriage. We'll see in 5 years.
But look,
But
I have all the goodwill in the world because I've watched Titanic with her at least twice, and she also made me sit through Gone with the Wind. So I have tons of goodwill that I'm sort of picking at. Although to be fair, I also once made her sit through La Dolce Vita because I told her it was about paparazzis and celebrities. And she's like, oh, that sounds interesting. That didn't tell her it was 3 hours long in Italian. Um, so yeah,
You know,
man,
speaking
I
of
still haven't
movies,
lived that
Neve
one
would
down.
speaking of movies Neve would definitely hate. We should probably talk about these movies that Chris made us
Yes,
watch.
absolutely. 100% she would hate these movies. So let's go.
uh, yeah, I think that's the perfect segue, Zach. So, okay, y'all, look, I just want to kind of set the stage, if that's okay. Is that just take a minute or so to set the stage of who this dude is?
Sure.
So, um, Hitchcock, Fritz Lang, a lot of the great thriller directors and writers were influenced by a French guy named Louis Feuillade. He was really famous for making serials, uh, SERI cereals, not breakfast cereals. Um, and I guess the equivalent of like, like a Netflix series today, where you could just binge watch like little 20-minute episodes. Um, and one of the writers for Louis Feuillade was an actor who came from the stage, kind of a young upstart named Julien Duvivier. And he started running in the circles of Cocteau and Renoir. Like they started running in a lot of circles together. And we have seen one of Duvivier's movies in the film club before, which was Panique. Um, and I was hoping the movies that were chosen today were going to be a little bit more like Panique than they were. So uh, it, this, he's a guy that has a focus on crime, um, and I think he's very interested in the criminal, the mind of the criminal, and the relationship between sort of police and criminals, and um, how little police know sometimes, and how wrong they can be, and how sneaky criminals can be, or at least the way they're perceived. I think there's a lot of that um, in his movies. So I'd be interested to hear what y'all have to say about these. I will say out of the gate, one of these I did not like at all, and one of them I liked a lot. Um, but so I'll be interested to see how the conversation goes. But yeah, Julien de Vivier. So he's one of the early pioneers of French cinema, and these are two of his movies. Let's
Which
see.
one are we going to talk about first? The one
I,
you
I
didn't like or the one you did?
I'd like to talk about La Tête d'un Homme first, if it's okay, because um, I just feel like, first of all, it's first chronologically in his um, career, but I also feel like there's going to be a little less to talk about there. So like to save the juice till the end. Um, Zach, I would be very curious to see your reaction to A Man's Neck or La Tête d'un Homme from 1933.
Well, I know this is going to be a shock to many with my previous history on French cinema during this podcast. I didn't like it too much. I think it starts actually pretty good. I actually think the movie starts pretty good. I'm pretty intrigued at the beginning, but I just really, really lose. I'm hoping I'm thinking of the right one. I watched these back to back, and they're very similar. But like this, the love element of this, I think is like I think this is the one that has the more of the love story thing going on, right? I'm not.
No, Pepe the Moco really has more of the love story.
Okay, I'm thinking of that one. Let me get oriented here. Okay, I know which one we're at. Yeah. So yeah, this one this is the one I watched this morning. I did think it started out pretty good, but I'll tell you one thing that really, really annoyed me was they kept playing that song throughout the whole movie. I don't know what it is, but it just irked me. It plays the beginning of the movie and it plays at the end, and I swear it plays like 3 times in the middle. And I hate it so much. I don't even know what it is, what they're saying, and I hated it. So it made me dislike it more. But of the two, I like this one better.
You liked La Tête d'un Homme better, A Man's Neck better.
Yeah, I did. I
Okay,
did. I was
okay.
way less bored.
Okay, all right. Adam, what about you?
I was so with Zach until that last part. Yeah, this film is not great. It starts off cool. I like the concept. It has like a murder mystery. When I read the kind of synopsis, I thought, yeah, this sounds pretty Hitchcocky. This sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll like this, more than I liked, Duvivier's other films that I watched. And unfortunately, I didn't. It does start off cool. I like the whole bloody handprint motif. Um, but it just loses me. It's a bore. There's no other way I can describe it. The film it's just a bore for a film, that has an intriguing central mystery, has a myriad of colorful characters. The film itself is just so boring. The mystery becomes immediately uninteresting. The characters become caricatures. There's no sort of discernible. There's no real sort of thorough plot happening. There's no clear acts. It's just a big mess and a boring mess, and I just didn't like it at all. I don't necessarily think, technically speaking, it's a bad film, but it's just a bit of a bore, unfortunately, and that's my kind of takeaway from The Man's Neck. There's nothing that really stands out to me apart from those opening few minutes with the bloody handprint on the wall. Beyond that, I can't really tell you a whole lot of what happens because I just became really uninterested as it went on.
Yeah, They Shoot Pictures puts this at 9,139.
Can we get some context? Like, what else is around there? Because that might be really
Yeah.
good or really bad.
Let's see. Let me see. Give me a few seconds. We'll see how fast okay, here we go. So anything, oh, well, this is a kick in the nuts that they said this is close to the documentary General Idi Amin Dada, which that's just wrong. That documentary is amazing. It's up by A Bug's Life, Pacific Rim, Bill Lustig's Maniac, which I can't believe that's
Whoa,
not higher.
Maniac is that low?
And yeah, I'm just seeing that too. There's no way that movie should be that low. I don't know if y'all ever saw this. I went on a brief Giuseppe Tornatore run, and there's this movie he made called The Legend of 1900, which I liked. But um, that's down there. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know.
Nothing
The
crazy anyway.
No, the really insane Filipino movie called For Your Height Only. Have you ever heard about this?
No.
Oh man, that is a wild, wild movie. I won't get into it because I can't even really describe it without being offensive to somebody. But look up For Your Height Only if you want a wild laugh, and watch it if you want an even bigger one. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. Uh, it's just kind of a real shit show at that point. You start getting into the 9,000s. But uh, think I kind of am in line with you, Adam. I think it suffers from the biggest crime possible in a movie in that it's just kind of middle of the road. Like it's just sort of there. Like it feels like it just kind of goes through the motions a little bit. Like I think what this movie was trying to be was that it was supposed to all rest on that one character. I think his name was Redek or something.
Yeah, Radic.
Redek. Reddick. I think
Yeah.
it's all supposed to rest on his performance and the writing around him. And I think the movie lives and dies by how much you are invested in him. Um, and I don't know that his character was written that well. Like if you compare that to M, which came out a few years before, which I mean, granted, that's not fair, but like just in terms of a character-driven horror movie, right? Or thriller or whatever, uh, where there's you kind of suspect you're just like invested in the personality of this suspect, right? And I guess I never really got invested in him. And therefore I never really fully got invested in the movie or like the crime element where they're trying to find, they're interviewing that big, like kind of dumb loaf of a guy who has the handprints there, trying to figure out if he did it. Like, I don't know. It, I think they just missed on this one.
Yeah, and the character of Radic is one that I think the actor is good. I think it definitely suffers from writing. He's definitely the most interesting character in the film, especially the fact that I remembered his name kind of
Hmm.
attests to that because I don't
Hmm.
know the name. I could not tell you the name of the detective. Could not tell you for love nor money. You could offer me $1 million if I could tell you the name of the detective in this movie,
Hmm.
and I would be walking away a poor man, because I could not do it. So it kind of attests that he's the only real interesting character because he's the only character whose name I remember and whose
Hmm.
face I remember vividly.
Right.
I think he's a good actor. I think towards the end he does suffer from overacting, and I've kind of noticed this a lot in recently, at least in older movies. And maybe this is why I'm not really syncing with 1930s French movies a whole lot, but they do tend to have quite a lot of sort of overly theatrical acting in them.
Yeah.
Which I know it seems like it was just kind of a style of the time, but it's just not really for me. Once they kind of get more into realism, and it's funny because these films are marketed as poetic realist movies, but the acting is still very, very theatrical. Uh, but yeah, that is one thing that I do kind of end up struggling with a lot. With these older movies, Pepe Le Moko suffers from it a lot less. Maybe that's because it was made a few years later, so the kind of style of how acting was happening maybe changed in that time. But I think you bring up a really good comparison point when you compare this film to M, which is not a fair comparison only because we know what these films are, but like if you look at the actual plot of these movies and the kind of time that they are being made in terms of where cinema was, like I think it's fair to maybe draw comparisons between them.
Right. Right. Right.
I don't think that's an unfair thing to do just because M is a better movie. When we talk about what these films are about and how they're shot, and even like the trajectory of the filmmakers themselves, is not the first time I've compared. Like we've looked at Fritz Lang and compared him with Duvivier. We did the same thing during Panic to the point where I was surprised that Fritz Lang had never remade Panic in Hollywood. It seems like
Hmm.
Panic seems like the perfect film for Fritz Lang to have remade in Hollywood. I could even tell you what actors would be in each role.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
that's how unsurprised I was. That's how surprised I was that Fritz Lang never did it. So I don't think it's unfair comparison to M, which M is just the infinitely better movie. And I do think, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to Vivier, but I just don't think he's that great. Anything that he did, Fritz Lang, Alfred Hitchcock, Clouseau, they all did it better. And that, and I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with that. We're talking about, when it comes to Fritz Lang and Alfred Hitchcock, we're talking about some of the greatest filmmakers and most influential filmmakers of all time. Not everybody can be at that level. Um, but yeah, like I think just Duvivier for me, after watching three of his movies now, and we can talk about this, after we talk about Pepe the Moco a little bit later, if we want to kind of do a full retrospect on our thoughts on Duvivier, but I just don't think he's that great. I just don't think he's that great, and that's okay, that's fine. But if I was to look at A Man's Neck, right? If this film wasn't directed by the guy who made Panic, and it was Pepe Namoko, which, to be fair to both of those films, they are actually quite influential. They're talked about quite a lot and influencing French cinema. This film, much less so. I'd never heard of it up until you decided to pick it. And I think if this film had been made by, a one-time studio director, nobody would talk about or have ever seen this movie past its first year of release, because it's just very mid.
Yeah.
Thinking back on the movie, one thing I think where the hinders this whole idea, because like I think we all talked about that the plot is interesting. It's
Right.
something that feels like it almost feels like it's the wrong genre. Like it wants to be like it almost tries to play itself as a murder mystery where it's not a mystery really. Like it's and I feel like it should be more of like, and I mean maybe it's not the right time for it, but more of a character study of like the consequences of these actions more than let's play this off as it's a murder mystery where the identity of the murderer, and it's like that's not interesting. Like it's nothing to keep me engaged in it.
And it's so interesting. There's something must have happened in translation, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with the source material of this movie, but it was written by a guy called Georges Simenon, who is he's like one of the most famous crime writers. He's like France's most famous crime writer of all time. He's like the Agatha Christie of France. So
I was just pulling up some facts on him as you talk. So like mine's here, Adam. Keep going, please.
yeah, like now again, I've never read the source material, so they might have just gotten lucky where they happened to pick one of his books that sucked. But this is they're pulling from one of the most famous crime writers of all time. So surely, if the book is anyway halfway decent from a mystery point of view, surely something has gone wrong with the production side, where whether it's in the script or whether it's where the studio interfered, once it was being made and how it was being edited. Obviously I can't say for sure because I've never read the original, book that it's based upon, but going by Simenon's reputation, you'd be surprised if it was like the main concept story, whatever you call it, if that was the problem. Really, this seems like something that was just, whether the script was a bad adaptation, or whether it was studio interference or whatever you call it. But I don't think we can blame the source material, or at least I would be surprised if the source material was to blame.
And just I'm more of an Agatha Christie guy. I've never read this guy's stuff, but if you're gonna have like in a mystery sense, you're gonna do Doyle or you're gonna do Christie. If they're gonna open up with the audience knowing what seems like vital information of a mystery, like who actually perpetrated it, then there needs to be something deeper going on. Like you need to like make the audience wonder, like, okay, we know this, but what don't we know? Like what what am I trying to learn here? If it's a mystery, then I should learn something by the end of it. And I don't really feel like I learn anything new by the time the film closes.
Yeah, there needs to be a twist. If you're going to open, like you said, by showing all your cards, you need to have an ace hidden somewhere else. There needs to be an extra twist in there. And some films do this, and I just don't get why they do it. You're taking away all of the audience's impetus to actually stay and watch the rest of your movie. There's a film that I watched a few months ago, that Zach, you'll be familiar with. I don't know if you ever actually ended up watching it, but you'll definitely be familiar because you put it into polls a few different times. It's called A Headless Woman. And it markets itself as a sort of ambiguous mystery, but it tells you everything you need to know literally 5 minutes into the movie. And I sat through the whole thing wondering if there's going to be like a twist or something, and there wasn't. And I was like, well, I just wasted an hour and a half of my life here. This was supposed to be this cool sort of mystery, and it's like not a mystery at all. So yeah, I just don't understand why they do it. Like as you said, like if you're gonna make a mystery film, why show exactly what happens and then not add an extra twist or a flavor at the end.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of feel like, if this was a character study on consequences, because like the whole thing is he almost says it as a joke, and somebody takes him up on this offer, and it's like, okay, that could be interesting to explore how that really affects someone, but they don't really do anything with it. Or at least nothing interesting with it. So it's just like I use the example just because like William Friedkin just passed away, so R.I.P. to him. Killer Joe, that's a lot of what it does. It like this husband and son want their mom murdered essentially for money, and it happens. And credit to that movie. I'm not going to spoil anything too major, but it happens when you don't expect it to happen. And it's more about them dealing with the aftermaths of that because they didn't know when it was going to happen. It feels like there's so much lead up, and then it just happens and it's over, and they have to deal with that. And it's
Yeah,
just much more interesting because of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's so many films that do that concept so much better. Like Strangers on a Train is the one that comes to mind for me. This concept of sort of accidentally, setting up a crime. Like Strangers on a Train is like an infinitely better version of something like that. Even like Fargo. And I know, the main plot device in Fargo isn't necessarily an accident, but dealing with the fallout of like putting a hit out on somebody. It's just they just do so much more with that concept than this film does.
It's the idea of when you act. To me, there's two ways to do crime. Either you set it up as almost like it's almost sterile with how efficient everyone is at it, or you go the complete opposite way and you show how messy it really is. Like everyone has the idea that it's all clean until they're in the middle of it, and then it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you don't really get that either one with this one at all. And that's why it doesn't really work as a character study, and it doesn't really work as any type of mystery.
This speaking of George, Simenon, this guy Maigret is like his, I think he wrote 400 novels, and this guy is a central character in a lot of them, right? So he sort of is
Like
this
as Poirot or
Poirot. Thank you. I
Holmes.
couldn't remember the
Yeah.
name. Yeah, thank you. Or like a Columbo type, right? Um, and like I think he's, this is the best I can kind of place this is going back to 1933. These novels had been coming out for about 15 years at that point, give or take. So they were probably fairly in the public, psyche. And this character was probably in the public psyche. And so, maybe there's an element of like what Ryan Johnson's doing with Knives Out, even though I think Knives Out is just better on a lot of areas. But by the time Glass Onion came out, people kind of were familiar with the character and just wanted to go see this guy in a movie. Um, or, or maybe that's not a great example because it wasn't based on just the fact that like they would have wanted to go see, Inspector Migrate go solve a crime. Um, and I could kind of see it playing in that way. More as a populist movie as opposed to like a movie from an auteur. Because I don't know that this has anything that we could necessarily focus on and say like this has the markings of an auteur, you know, um, which is
No.
that's fine. I mean, populist movies are there for a reason. Like I'm sure this sold well if that was the case, right? Um, but um, maybe like not all of them age well. Some of them do. Like as much as I like to crap on James Cameron, like his movies age well. Like his movies will be enjoyed for generations. Um, and there's a lot that just don't. They're kind of like Netflix movies today, right? They kind of come in and it's like, oh, here's another movie about a guy moving to a small town and finding himself or something. It's like that equivalent. So this to me feels more like that, something that was maybe a studio movie, maybe influenced by producers as far as kind of what they wanted to see, and he just sort of went out and like directed this movie, almost like took a paycheck. I don't really know what else to say. If this was like a deep passion project for him, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, we had last week we had three unanimous thumbs up for the movies that were chosen. So far, we're 3 unanimous thumbs down. Let's see about the next movie. So fast forward a few years, 1937. Um, Julien Duvivier gets Jean Gabin to star in a movie of his. Um, and it's you're talking about this poetic realism. This is a major film in the poetic realism movement, based in the Casbah in Algeria, and it's called Pepe Le Moko. And the Wikipedia says it recounts the trappings of a gangster on the run in Algiers who believes he's safe from arrest in the Casbah. Real quick, I'll just say before I get opinions, kind of objectively speaking, They Shoot Pictures has this at 1,174, which I don't think, no matter what we end up saying about this movie, it certainly is something that's, referenced a lot and influential in a lot of ways, kind of as you mentioned earlier, Adam. So their ranking doesn't surprise me. Um, but we can get into whether or not it's too high. So this time, Adam, why don't you go first? What did you think of Pepe La Moko?
Yeah, this is my second time seeing Pepe Le Moko. I first watched it about 2-ish years ago. It was part of like a Criterion challenge, and I don't remember what the prompt was, but I watched it about 2 and a bit years ago. Um, I didn't care that much for it then, and I don't care for it that much now. But it's a little bit different than with A Man's Neck. Like with A Man's Neck, I think it's just not that special. There's just nothing about it to make me
Hmm.
interested in it.
Hmm.
Whereas with Pepe the Moko, I have the same issue with it that I have with the rules of the game. And that when I watch this movie, I recognize that this is a well-made movie. Kind of like with Panique, the set design is fantastic. The way the way it's filmed is really good. Jean Gabin gives a pretty good performance. I recognize how important it is. It's definitely not a badly made movie or anything like that. But I just don't find it interesting. I just really struggle to get any, actually connect with the film. It's the same issue with Rules of the Game, really. I definitely wouldn't, say, a thumbs down or anything like that per se. Definitely more of a thumb in the middle. Because I do certainly recognize that it is an important movie, and I can understand why a lot of people do vibe with it, as the kids would say.
Hmm.
I unfortunately just don't vibe with it, as the kids would say. It is, um, yeah, it's just one of those movies that no matter how many times I see it, I just don't think I'm ever going to sit there and say that I love it, even though I know that I know that it's not a bad movie. I don't know. That's kind of the best way I can put this. I'm sure we all have examples of these where
Oh yeah.
we know that they're not bad movies. We just can't really get on board with them, and this is just one of those for me.
Zach, what about you?
So I guess the best way for me to describe this. So you guys have seen like tier list, right? You know, you have your S, your A, all the way down to F, right?
Of course, yes.
So if I had a tier below that, I would just put French films. That would be the title of it. No, I have the same issue. I just find this movie boring. Like it is the same thing. I was just like, I have no interest in what's going on. I think the main character is really not likable at all, and I think the love
Mm.
interest whole thing has no chemistry to it. I just like I wasn't into it at all. That's why I didn't like at least the other one I felt like I could engage with like, but I like mysteries in a sense. This one I was just like I don't have feel like I have anything to engage with.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel like this
Oh,
film is much more of a character study, um, than the last film, which was a bit more kind of like a pulp film. This one, I think, is a bit more about the character of Pepe Lamoko as opposed
mhm.
to what he's actually, what's actually going on. Because I definitely agree, the romance in this film sucks. It's like so pointless. Yeah.
There, there's two. So I did not like this as much as Panic. Um, and I think a critique of Panic could be that it's style over substance to a degree, but the
Mm.
style is just so good. I just love the style so much. He created these I guess they're miniatures. I don't even know. I don't even really understand how he did it, but the way that he set up the sets for that movie, you don't see a lot. It was so unique and so interesting. Um, so I was very intrigued when this movie was taking place in the Casbah. You know, I've actually been to the Casbah. Um, I don't know for sure that it's the same one because the one I went to was in Morocco, in a city called Tangier. I don't know, throughout history, I don't know if it's changed places,
Well,
but
did
it
you
looked,
rock it? Did you rock the Casbah?
oh, I rocked
Good, good.
it. Um, but the way they describe, the first, let's call it 5 to 10 minutes. Do you know where there's I believe it's a detective who's explaining to his coworker like why the Casbah is tricky for them, and he gets into like, it's just a series of mazes. Every staircase is a ladder, like they're showing this like gnarled like convoluted street system, narrow alleys. Like it's just obvious that there's a million places to hide in here. I was hooked in that part. I was like, oh great, like this is going to be super interesting. Um, I hate to do this, but like imagine what Fritz Lang would have done with something like this, right? Or just somebody where they were just like really using like the angles of the city in creative ways in chase scenes, or like the fact that they set it up where they said there's like the religious traditionalists, and he doesn't really have any information on that, but they seem to be good people. And then there's the criminals, and then there's the Slavics, and then there's the people from Africa, like more of like different parts of Africa, right? So he's like setting up the scene, and I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Um, so first 10 minutes of this movie is like a 10 out of 10 for me. But then they didn't really do that much with the Cosmo. Like they did a little bit, but like I think this movie could have basically been shot anywhere, right? Like there was a few times where they were like the police were, kind of charging in, and they showed a guy running and like telling all of the sex workers to like hide, or there was a few moments like that where they kind of reminded us that we were in this really interesting city. Um, but I do wish they would have done more with it just visually throughout the film, because most of it we could have just, it was just like on a set, right? You just kind of make a room look sort of interesting, and then you have this melodrama around the set. So I was a little disappointed in that, to be honest. Um, I was looking for something really crazy, because like the poet in me, which by the way, there's really not much of a poet in me, but like the the mystique around the Casbah is so rebellious and anarchic, and like there's been so much sort of in pop culture around this idea of the Casbah as a place where like it's like a den of thieves, right? And it's like where all sin and the seven sins are like just sort of where it's where you go for that, and it's all hidden and like behind closed doors, and there's just so much intrigue around that, and I don't feel like he tapped into it that much, which was disappointing.
Yeah, like I definitely get the whole like a lot of this film does take place in rooms, which is disappointing. And then there are moments where they kind of do go around the Casbah, which are super interesting. You kind of get a feel this film obviously came out, before Panic. Panic, I think, came out nearly 10 years later. So I think this film does a good job of showcasing his interest in like
Hmm.
architecture and design
Yeah.
in his filmmaking, and then he just kind of leveled up by the time Panic came out. Um, yeah, but I definitely get it is very sort of talking in rooms melodrama for a lot of it, which is maybe one of the reasons why I was put off kind of subconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah, I was disappointed in that for sure. I don't know too much about, speaking of authors, I don't know too much about this guy, Henri Labarthe. He was the novelist, and he also was a screenwriter. So, maybe, we if anything, we could just be watching a young director sort of find his stride, right? By the time he got to Panic, maybe he sort of stepped out and said like, no, this is who I am now, and like in terms of the way he wanted to portray his films visually. And maybe early on, he was more influenced by the the source material, or maybe I don't know, but it could just be him gaining confidence as an artist, right? Whereas
Yeah.
someone like Cocteau, love him or hate him, like he knew who he was as an artist from day one.
Yeah, or even like we were talking about Kubrick earlier, yes, 3 films in, he's making masterpieces. Um,
Right,
whereas with Duvivier, it took like I don't know how when he made his first film, but there's like nearly 15 years in between A Man's Neck and Panique. And he would have made a good few films between those times. I'm looking at his filmography here. So he made his first film in 1922, and one could argue he didn't make his first good film until 1946 or whenever Panique came out. So,
right.
yeah, so that's nearly he was in the business over 20 years by the time Panique came out. In terms of directing films.
Yeah, I mean, people like, so if you read lists about like, Duvivier films you have to see, there's another movie with John Gabin called La Bandera that's very highly rated. He made one I think that most people like really love called La Belle Épique or La Belle Équipe, something like that.
Okay.
So anyways, he made movies that were popular and fairly highly rated, but like the problem is I think now that we're at this stage of seeing three of his movies. Um, and he did make Flesh and Fantasy, which I want to call out as a Vinegar Syndrome Labs title. And that movie I think he was one of the three directors on there. That movie is awesome. So he's starting maybe coming into his own a little bit. It's more of a horror movie. That was in 1943, and Panic was in 46. Yeah. Flesh and Fantasy is very good. I forgot. So I've seen four of his movies then. Um, but it's possible that he's just not the same tier. He's just not that top tier director, which
No.
in my head he was. That's why I was so excited for um this week. But like, at some point you have evidence in front of you, right? Like I
Well,
can't
this is
keep
the
making that.
thing. Like and I'm not going to call him a one-trick director or a one-hit wonder per se, because I don't think that's kind of fair. Um, but you do see this, and again, I'm not putting him on the same tier as someone like Richard Kelly. But like you look at Richard Kelly and you watch Donnie Darko and you're like, wow, this guy can make the fuck out of a film.
Right,
I can't wait to watch the rest of his movies. And then you watch The Box and you're like, is this even the same dude? And then you do start to wonder then about their credentials. Did they just get lucky? Did everything just fall in the right place? And maybe that's
yeah,
probably unfair to put. I'm not going to put Duvivier in that category because I'm looking at his filmography. He worked in the business for over 40 years, made, from what I'm looking at, like definitely more than 20 films, and in that time frame, probably close to 30 if I'm not going to sit here and count. So he was very successful in terms of because obviously he wouldn't have kept getting hired over the course of
right,
4 decades if he wasn't.
right,
So he was obviously a successful guy. He made a lot of movies, but I think the takeaway from this is that he's just, yeah, unfortunate. And this seems like a slight, but it's really not, because we're telling him he's not as good as Hitchcock and Lang and stuff like that. And I don't think we can necessarily call that an insult to anybody, because we're
right,
talking
right,
about pantheon directors. If we're talking about a Mount Rushmore of film directors, Alfred Hitchcock is in there.
right,
And I would argue maybe Fritz Lang deserves a seat in there too. Not everybody would, but if we're talking about like, maybe like the top 20 filmmakers of all time, Hitchcock, Fritz Lang, they're both going to be in there more than likely for most people.
right.
Um, Especially when we talk about importance.
Mhm.
And yeah, like Duvivier is not making the cut. He's probably not making the cut of top 50 directors of all time. He's probably not making the cut of top 100 directors of all time. But
Right.
that doesn't mean he's not like he's like a bad filmmaker or anything. He's just mid. As you said in our Discord, Chris, he's mid.
Right.
So, and somebody has to be mid, because if nobody's mid, then everybody's amazing. And what's the fun in that?
You don't know love until you've experienced pain, right? You have to have that kind of,
Exactly.
yeah, right,
People like the Vivier need to exist so that we can talk about how good Hitchcock is.
right.
You
So in
need to
that
have
case,
that comparison.
yeah. So he's very important in that case.
Exactly.
Uh, there's one more thing I want to ask you all about before, but are there any other thoughts on Pepe La Moco before we jump to a topic I want to ask you all, kind of a tangential topic?
Not for me anyway.
No, I'm good.
Zach, do you have more Duvivier films in your watch list now on Letterboxd?
No, I think he peaked with Panic, and I'm okay accepting that.
I will say, uh, Flickr Alley put out like this huge restoration project. It was so cool. Duvivier, like early Duvivier movies, I think like his early shorts and Silence, and it was a work with Lobster Film, and apparently it was a very expensive, like labor of love project. So I bought that to support Jeff and what Flickr Alley was doing. Um, I must say I'm slightly less excited to dive into it now. Um, but yeah, who knows? Maybe the commentary and the context will help. But there is a beautiful box set from Flickr Alley about early Duvivier movies that is shocking. It's not a Criterion release. Um, okay, so we've seen mostly my fault here, but we've seen films from Cocktail. We've seen films from Renoir. We've seen film from Duvivier. And then through the film club, we've seen L'Atalante. What's the director's name there?
Jean Vigo.
Vigo, thank you. Uh, Vigo, I think, is, for me, as much as I love Renoir, for me, Vigo's the one that I wish I could have seen 20 more from.
Yeah, it's hard to compare Vigo to everybody else because he only has the one
Yeah.
feature length film, because obviously, tragic young death. So, but L'Atalante is a masterpiece.
I feel like the other ones we've seen, well, anyways, before I get into my opinion, I'm curious to hear y'all's take. So based on what we've seen, how do y'all feel about sort of French films in the 30s?
I'll let
I
Zach
feel
go
like I have
first.
made my thoughts very well known.
Yeah.
I'm just checking Renoir's filmography to decide if the films I like from him were made mostly in the 30s or the 40s.
Well, for sure, The Grand Illusion was 30s.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm looking at his filmography here. The ones that I like, yeah, are 30s. I really like Tony, which is from 1935, which was like, for me, like the first true realist film. So I'd really recommend that one. Grand Illusion is a masterpiece. I think that's his best film. I know,
Mhm.
I know. Obviously, we had this discussion. We talked about the rules of the game, but I still think the Grand Illusion is his best film. And I think if we're talking about from an actual filmmaking standpoint, I think Renoir has to give. We have to give the plaudits to Renoir because as much as I don't vibe with the rules of the game, I would be an absolute liar if I didn't say it was an incredibly important film. Because it is so much of that like that film paved the way for so much filmmaking
Right.
staples. So it's I can't sit there and say it is one of the most, like we had this discussion when we talked about it. It's one of the most important films ever made. It's just a pity that I just don't really enjoy it. So yeah, I think Renoir is the one. I've said it before. So many cinematic roads lead back to Renoir. So I think it'd be weird to not say he'd be the number one dude from this era of from what we've watched.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I remember I did like Rules of the Game, especially in memory. I liked it a lot. After we spoke about it, as I think about it and reflect on it, I liked it a lot. But something about Grand Illusion, maybe it was when I saw it or subject matter was more interesting. I don't know what it was, but I can't imagine many movies being better than Grand Illusion. It's just so,
Yeah, I think it's just more. I think it's just more entertaining.
yeah.
Rules of the Game, I'm sure, was very entertaining for people of France at that time when it came out because they would have all known people like these people,
Hmm,
and
hmm, hmm.
they would have read about people like this, and it's kind of like it's kind of like, what did you call it? The Real Housewives of Paris or something at the
Mm-hmm,
time.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just kind of like that. So I'm sure at the time it was incredibly entertaining, but I think The Grand Illusion is just more universally entertaining no matter what the period is. Because it's a film about World War One and prisoners of war and stuff. It's just something that, I just think is just more entertaining for sort of, anyone really at any time. So I think, like, if I was to recommend you a film, Zach, to try and prove that not all French films from this era are like boring, watch The Grand Illusion, because it's just a really good, prisoner of war movie and from World War One. It's really entertaining. So that'd be one I would recommend, if to try and sort of prove that not all films from 30s in France are boring.
Okay, maybe one day Criterion will actually put that back out, and I guess it's on the channel though, isn't it? I assume.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think it's on the channel. Yeah, I
Or it
think
was recently, but
Studio Canal put out a Blu-ray of it as well. That's what I have. I have their Blu-ray from it, and they might have done a 4K too. I don't know if I had my 4K player when they put it out. Maybe that's why I bought the Blu-ray. But Studio Canal definitely have a Blu-ray of it.
yeah. And
I
I
will.
think
I
as
will check that out on recommendation then.
I think as far as, I use my picks to experiment, right? We've been to Africa, we've done female noir, we've done um I try to experiment, right? In different types of filmmakers, different types of movies. I had a lot of itches to scratch around early French cinema. I think I'm good. I don't think my picks are going to be a lot of early French cinema anymore.
Oh, I'm
I think
disappointed.
I know, I
Man.
know,
Sacrifices.
I know. I think I get it. Like, I mean, of course, there's like a million gaps to fill, and I'm sure there's directors that I'll find that I love, and I do really, really strongly recommend if anybody has an interest in older films or like the history of cinema, watch Louis Friad's serials like Fantomas and Judex. These are top tier, like these are awesome. Very, very good. These are from like 1918, 1916. And it's amazing what he does. It's so far ahead of the turn, far ahead of history as far as like storytelling and visuals and like Judex is the basically where Batman came from. Um, it's not directly like Batman, but it's just this guy who fights in the shadows and has like kind of futuristic type equipment and technology that he set up in his lair and stuff. It's pretty awesome. So there's gems in there, but as far as what we talk about on the podcast, I think I'm good for early French cinema for a while. Um, Maybe I might do New French Extreme, um, or whatever it's called. Is it New Extreme, New French? What is it called?
Yeah,
French
New
Extreme.
French Extreme. New French Extreme. Yeah.
Yeah, I might do that next if I go to France, but it'll be a while, I think, before I revisit France.
Ooh, yeah, we get to see. We're gonna get to see some martyrs.
I know, but I also maybe not do New French Extreme because Adam might sit out that week, so I have to see how we weave that one in.
Yeah, I'll let you guys take that one. Me and Zach did Barbenheimer together, so it's only fair that you guys get to do an episode together now. I'll leave that week for you.
Uh-huh. Zach and I can just do a torture week or like a shocking gore week or
I
something.
Spit on Your Grave franchise week or something.
Oh God.
Oh man,
Oh,
that last one the original director made is like 2.5 hours and is apparently awful. I don't know if
Zach,
I could do the whole franchise.
I sat through it.
Did you?
I sat
Why?
I sat through it. Just pure uh torturous curiosity.
Was it as bad as everyone says it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
here's the thing. It it's like okay, this will be quick. I Spit on Your Grave is low budget and like um uh imperfect, right? But it it just kind of catches you and like it draws you in, right? And by the time she switches to go on the revenge part, she's such a badass. Like she's just you like want to see her win and like the revenge part of that story is so effective, I think. And it almost justifies the horrible like uncomfortable beginning. but the sequel or whatever, because there's like different. I haven't seen the ones that are like reboots from the different directors. I haven't seen those.
Those are
But
actually pretty good, I will say.
I've heard that. Yeah, I need to check it out. But the sequel, it just has like imagine if you have somebody that gets like a blank check and just edits their own movies, and so they'll leave in like literally like 8 minutes of a conversation that you get the point in a minute and a half or like maybe a minute.
Oh, God.
So you're just watching 7 extra minutes of like this lady talking about the fact that she's a novelist or something. But you're like, yeah, like I get it. Like what? And then there's just like overtly racist stuff thrown in there that think they're trying to play off of the whole like, people in the rural South are racist thing, but they do
Wonderful.
it like yeah, I know, which I know is going to be something that you love, but they do it in a very like cartoonish way where it's just like, dude, you're not even trying, you know? So, oh my God, I hated it. It's so bad. It's so bad. By the time you get to the revenge stuff, yeah, of course, there's some interesting kills and stuff. I mean, it's okay, but like, no way, no way.
Well, thank you, Ronan Flicks, for my copy of that movie that I will probably leave unwatched, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's how
Yeah.
I watched it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, look,
What's next then?
speaking of torturous experiences, Zach, what are you making us watch?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So this week, we're going to for our next episode, we will be doing. I guess the term would be criminal fairy tales is what I think would be the theme here.
Okay.
So the first one will be the 1996 film Freeway, starring Kiefer Sutherland and Reese Witherspoon, which I noticed. This is a little off topic. Chris, I noticed you watched Ted Bundy. Have you seen this one?
No.
Okay, same director as the Ted Bundy
Yeah.
movie you watched
Yeah.
recently. So
I saw that. Yeah, I
Matthew
was
Bright.
excited.
This movie's great. I have a lot of love for it just because where I work with kids and stuff like this, and this is very much Reese Witherspoon playing, in my opinion, one of the most. It's over the top, but still over the top in what you expect from kids. Like I was like, this is things I see a lot, and it's both funny and very sad. So I picked that for our first one. And then the second one, I know Adam is excited to have Paul Walker on the channel. On our podcast, we're gonna have the 2006 Running Scared. There are like 10 movies called Running Scared. It's the 2006 one, which takes from quite a few different fairy tales to like tell its story, and it's violent, it's fun. So I'm gonna try to pick. I tried to pick some fun stuff for you, so we could wash out some whatever this was.
That actually ties in then, with because obviously the first one mentioned as teenage girl in it, and Paul Walker loves teenage girls, teenage girls, so
yeah,
that works out well.
Oh my gosh.
I can't be done for slander if he's dead, right?
No.
Correct. Correct.
Was that a thing with him?
Yeah, his last girlfriend they started dating when he was 33 and she was 16.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah, I guess that kind of gets forgotten about after everything.
Yep.
Dude, yeah, what? Yeah, whatever. Like, I just like talk to a 16-year-old for 5 minutes and tell me as an adult that there's like any interest in having more than a 2-minute conversation with that person. Like,
well, I think the problem is that they don't want to have conversations with that person.
No, I get it. I get it.
I
It's
don't think
just
that's where the issue is.
all right, whatever. I hate that so much. Okay.
We'll save that for the next episode.
Yeah, there we go.
So I want to say this was fun, but it kind of wasn't fun. But hopefully we'll have more fun next time.
We're closing the chapter on at least for the podcast. We're closing the chapter on early French cinema, right? We're good.
Okay, that's fun then.
Yeah, the best news I've heard all day.